So, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. This is the second in this fall's Professionals in Sustainability presentations. My name is Kathy Lang, for those of you that do not know me. I work here at SUNY ESF as program advisor for the online Bachelor of Science degree program in Sustainability Management. And this series was started to specifically serve our online student community as a dedicated virtual event to learn from individuals whose career paths include a sustainability focus. So we'll be recording today's Zoom event, and I will send a link to it along with resources shared by our speaker via email afterwards. And you can also access previous event recordings on our Professionals in Sustainability webpage, which I'll include in my follow-up email too. We'll have time for questions following the presentation, but please feel free to submit any that you might have through the chat until we open up for Q&A, at which time we very much welcome folks to unmute and join the conversation. So thank you to ESF's Office of Sustainability and our Office of Career Services that have helped us in identifying speakers for this series, including today's, who's an ESF alum. And also they help in promoting our events. So great to see faculty and student from Sustainability Management join us today. And I get the honor of introducing our speaker, so Benjamin Cullum. Ben is an experienced energy and sustainability professional with a demonstrated history of working in the MEP, or mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering industry. Well-versed in calculating operational carbon and determining effective short and long-term carbon reduction strategies, he is skilled in project management, LEED, New York City Energy Code, building commissioning, energy modeling, and GHG analysis. So with that, I welcome Ben for joining us this afternoon very much, and look forward to hearing about your position.
Great. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here. Let me get my screen going. Okay.
Thank you.
Just to kick off, I'm going to talk about kind of how I got to where I am, as well as what certifications that I have gotten in that are kind of relevant to the MEP and construction built environment industry, that have moved me forward in my career. So I graduated from ESF with environmental biology in 2011. I have spent the last 10 years working in the built environment, primarily in New York City, but currently my role is I work for a real estate company as the internal energy and sustainability manager, and I oversee kind of the global portfolio. We have properties in London, Paris, Boston, New York, DC, Montreal, and Toronto. Each of our cities have their own designated energy managers, and I help them kind of push forward and make our buildings more efficient. That's my current role. It's a little different than what I've done for most of my career, but I'll kind of get into that. I have my lead AP, BDC. I'm a well AP, certified building commissioning agent, and also I'm a certified energy manager. I'm going to get into kind of what those are later, but these have kind of been core to helping move forward in my career. So I started off with doing environmental health and safety consulting. So that was indoor air quality, asbestos testing, mold, and things of that nature. It also kind of led into, as I said, indoor air quality testing. And a lot of the issues with indoor air quality and mold issues in buildings is based off of failures in the HVAC system. So I started to learn about how to troubleshoot issues with that. Outside air issues, filtration issues, water issues, also led into envelope, for seeing if the exterior of the building is leaking, finding water leaks and things of that. This experience led me to become a commissioning agent. And a commissioning agent's role in new construction is you review a building as it's being constructed to ensure that everything is being built as per plans, as per code, and correctly. You raise any issues found. You also provide insight on the way that you review plans and see if you can catch any issues beforehand, and things of that. In that role, I was also a lead consultant. This led me to getting my lead AP. So I would help clients submit for their lead application, guide them through the process, what needed to be done, resources needed to be gained. Through that led me to kind of an energy modeler. And this is where I think my career really took the greatest step forward for getting into energy and sustainability, making buildings more efficient, and working with the engineers to improve their designs and push the envelope. So as an energy modeler, I would create 3D virtual copies of buildings, and we'd run it through software that would help us be able to predict how much energy a building would use. And through that, we can do different variations in the building and propose different designs, more efficient equipment, and show what the energy savings would be, both with carbon cost as well as electricity, natural gas, and things of that. And so it really allows you to prove to the design engineers, to the client, that you can make a more efficient design, by maybe you spend a little bit money, but in the long term, you'll save quite a bit of money. And so this concept of energy modeling and viewing how energy moves through a system really interested me, as coming from the biology background, the environmental biology background, because how energy moves through a building, it's own ecosystem of heat transfers and things of that. And so it was fascinating to me, and my mind really kind of locked onto it. So I've been an energy modeler now probably for 7 or 8 years now, and it's always a puzzle figuring out. And this also leads to ASHRAE Energy Auditor. I'll get into what ASHRAE is, if you're not familiar with it, but I would do ASHRAE energy audits for 1, 2, and 3, and that's just varying levels of how deep of a dive you get into a building. Typically, that's for existing buildings. So I would be looking at retrofit solutions to try and reduce a building's energy use. It's become a little bit bigger of a thing here in New York City with the implementation of Local Law 97. Local Law 97 is a first of its kind carbon law. Each building gets an allotment of carbon, operational carbon, so burning natural gas, electricity use, and if you use more than you're allowed, you get fined. This has really led to a massive increase in sustainability industry in New York City. It's a huge need for as far as everyone is looking for somebody that can help them reduce their carbon. So as I kind of get into my day-to-day when I was a consultant with the MEP firms, so mechanical, electrical, plumbing firm, was I would work with engineers to make their designs more efficient. When I first started in the industry, there was a lot of rules of thumb and people that were stuck in their ways, where you had to really know your stuff and prove it to them in order to get them to change what their standard design was, and get them to implement these new technologies that, in their view, weren't necessarily proven. So you'd have to perform analysis to prove savings, not only to the engineers that you were working with, but to the client, because at the end of the day, they were the ones that would say yay or nay on this. A big part of this was review and calculate any potential incentive opportunities. So this is involved with working with local utilities, reaching out to the various programs. Here in New York State, we have NYSERDA, which is an awesome resource. A lot of what I did in my career was only possible because NYSERDA was providing funding. And so knowing that that money's out there and pitching to clients and then being able to get that money was pretty big. This allowed me to do some different things. The One of the examples is that in 2020, when the world shut down, and because I did have a background in indoor air quality and everything that long, I was able to move forward with a NYSERDA funded program to review how do we design our building spaces to protect from COVID. And so that was working with all the technologies that were being thrown at the wall. Was UV working? Should we do air changes? Is it filtration? Is it a combination of all three? And so, that was a really fascinating project that got published by NYSERDA. And the findings were more or less that filtration and air changes are a big way. But a big part of that is then now we're spending a little bit more money on energy. You're actually using more energy. So then how do we offset that? And figuring out ways to reduce energy, but also make our built environment safe. So another big part of my career working with engineering firms was being involved from day one. Trying to, as you can see on the left, putting a windmill on a Hummer really isn't solving the problem. You need to be involved with looking at energy and sustainability with the built environment from day one, so that you end up with something closer to a Prius. There are a lot of buildings out there that, say they have solar on their roofs, but in actuality, it's only like 0.1% of what their building is consuming. You really, in order to design a truly low carbon building, you really need to be thinking about these from day one. So this is an example of what kind of gets produced for when you do energy modeling. So I believe this was an airport project that I was involved with. And so what we did was we compared the baseline, and the baseline is essentially the worst building that code will allow you to build. It uses the most energy, and so you start with that, and you go through and you take the different design iterations, and you can show the savings. And so then this can get related into cost and carbon, present these results to the engineer and the owner. And you can also see the great thing about when you energy model is it's really advanced software. It breaks down the energy by end uses. And so you can actually see where your largest energy source is in an effort to say, okay, this is what I'm going to target in order to reduce energy in my building. It's easier to reduce energy when the slice of the pie is really big, compared to going after something that was small. So kind of getting into certifications now. The first one that I got was LEED. So there's the LEED GA, and then beyond that, there is the specification. For as far as my career went, I've both been involved with new construction, with renovations and interior design work. So I have building design and construction, which is mainly focused on new construction and major renovations. But then there's also interior design and construction. So those two are pretty interchangeable. Some of the credits differ a little bit, but those were the two common ones that I've seen. Building operations and maintenance, so building O&M actually applies more to what I'm doing now, which is managing buildings over a long term. The credits do vary there. Neighborhood development is like entire community projects. And then we also have homes, which is single or small family homes. And then there's the broad one of cities. I personally have never been involved with the bottom three. I've always just worked on either individual buildings or tenant fit outs, which would be the interior design. So the second one is well. Well AP got really popular over the last few years. So well is the difference between LEED and well is LEED is more concerned about how the building is built, what materials are going into it, and the energy use of the building. Well is more concerned about the tenants themselves. So this is, health and wellness. This is indoor air quality. You are designing a space where people want to come to it. So this has gotten really popular since 2020. They do have did produce it's the Well Health and Safety rating. That's the kind of the second one. It doesn't require a lot of effort. It's more putting policies in place and for cleanings and things like that. Well is more concerned with like the structure itself. So acoustics, lighting, comfort, things of that nature. So the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, ASHRAE for short, this is one of the big governing bodies for design standards in not only for sustainability, but for construction itself. ASHRAE has many different regulations that they put out that usually get adopted by various federal and local city regulators for what your design standards are for construction. The big one for sustainability is ASHRAE 90.1. That is the Bible essentially for how you determine and how you should be building your building efficiently. It creates kind of the rules that you need to follow, not only for physical design, so what efficiency your boilers need to be, and do you need pipe insulation, but also how you analyze your building. ASHRAE 90.1 Appendix G is the rules of how you energy model. It details out how you do that. So one that I don't have that I probably should have gotten was that first one on the list, which is Building Energy Modeling Professional. Probably would have been the next one on my list if I had stayed in engineering with MEP firms. So that essentially it shows what you're doing when you're doing energy modeling. And a lot of these accreditations they're great to have because it tells people what you're doing. Without having to kind of get into details. The next one is Building Commissioning Professional. That's BCXP. So I don't have there's another commissioning certification that you get from another body, is the one that I have, but they're mostly interchangeable. It just depends on, sometimes local jurisdictions prefer one over the other. In New York, they're interchangeable. Building Energy Assessment Professional, getting into more reviewing buildings, audits, things of that nature. And then Operations and Performance Professional, OPMP. That's kind of getting into like O&M kind of things. One I may be looking for in the future. So the other one is the Association of Energy Engineers. The first one on the list is Certified Energy Manager. This is a big one in my industry. A lot of job applications, both that I have seen and also created for the firms that I have worked for, require Certified Energy Manager. So I I worked with engineers most of my career, but I am not a design engineer. I'm not a PE. I'm not certified to sign off on drawings. Getting Certified Energy Manager gives me weight. It allows the people know what I'm talking about when it comes to the built environment and how to save energy. I will say engineering is one of the awesome fields that you can become a PE without going to school for being an engineer. It just takes a lot longer and you have to study a lot more. I had no interest in that, but it was an option for me. So you can learn and get that accreditation if you want, but CEM kind of also gives you, that it's a lot of times it's like Certified Energy Manager or a PE when you see a lot of job applications. Next one is Certified Measurement and Verification Professional. This is getting into kind of O&M, but also, so measurement and verification is you propose something and then you verify if the results were the same. It kind of is similar to commissioning, but more data-based than the actual like reviewing of the plans and things like that. Certified Building Commissioning Professional, the CBCP. So that's the certification I have. That allows me to commission buildings for LEED, as well as there's a couple local law items here in New York City that I can sign off on and write the reports for. Certified Energy Auditor. That's kind of getting into ASHRAE audits and things like that. I will say that some of these, so just to back up a bit, LEED does not have a time in industry or an experience requirement. You register for the exam, you take it. If you pass, you're good. Well, same deal. There's no time in the industry required. It's very similar to LEED. It's set up very similar. The tests are same kind of style, and from there. Under the ASHRAE, some of these do have, actually most of these have time in the industry requirements. However, if you are interested, part of the links that will be provided is links to these where you can see the requirements. A lot of these have junior requirements. So, after like 1 or 2 years in the industry, you can take it. You pass the test. You have like a junior designation, and then once you get your experience, it automatically switches to the full thing. So you don't need to necessarily wait. A lot of times it's easier because you've been in the industry longer. You've had more experience with things, but it's not required. Same thing goes for the Association of Engine Engineers. CEM I know that does have a time requirement, but I'm 95% sure it also has a junior level that you can take. And commissioning professional also has a requirement. So I kind of went through that fast. But I guess I kind of really wanted to open it up for any questions, comments. I will say, actually, before one final note is I definitely took a roundabout way to get to what I do. When I left college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And it definitely was kind of the longer way around. I think that where the world is now and courses in sustainability and things of that in the built environment have really come a long way. And so, I will say that. On another note, and all of these accreditations that I have spoken about, I didn't pay for any of them. And I think it's really important when you're going out and looking at jobs and things of that nature. Ask the employer about is accreditation a thing that they're willing to pay for, because some of them are quite expensive, especially when you're first starting out in your career. The CEM is a week-long course plus an exam. As the Certified Building Commissioning Professional is also a 3-day course plus an exam, and these things weren't cheap. And so definitely make sure that you have an employer that's willing to support you and reimburse you for these, and that you aren't paying for any of them because it's just not necessary. And so, yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
Awesome. Thank you, Ben, for your overview of what you do and how you got there. And I do, echo you. If folks have questions, to feel free to put in the chat or unmute. We can actually stop sharing if you want and just have a conversation. If somebody wants to go back to a specific slide, I'm sure we can. But yeah, it's super interesting. And I know we talked about this in preparing for today. And I wrote down a few notes, but I'm going to just look around. And if anyone wanted to jump in first. Okay. I'm not seeing anything right off the bat.
I'll jump in real quick, just sort of, Ben. So you've seen the LEED now with well. from like, as you're sort of like looking at the larger ecosystem, how do you see those two competing with each other, or like where's the interest now in terms of like the lead versus well, that we've had these two systems that are overlap a bit but are different? And
Yeah, so lead and well, there are some synergies between them. So there are some credits that overlap. I will say that lead is probably leading building certification that people are getting. However, it's kind of becoming baseline. It's kind of becoming understood that you should be designing to these standards. I've even had clients in the past that said, I want to design to lead standards, but I don't want to pay the money to lead to get the plaque. That was a pretty common thing. I want to design they'd issue specifications and they say, we want to design to lead silver standards, which in New York City is code, quite frankly. But saying I want to design to lead gold standards, but I don't want to pay lead or go through the headache of lead. Well has become more popular recently because it's more focused on the health and wellness. It gives people a sense of mind that they're going into a safe space. I will say that well is a more rigorous approval process than lead. It does involve post-construction inspection by a third party, which lead does not require. I actually am a well AP auditor, so I can go in and evaluate whether or not a space has met the requirements for well as a third party. And part of that is you just show up day one and you don't speak with the client, you don't interview with the engineers, you show up on site, and if they pass, they pass, and if they fail, they fail, and they have to fix it. Or else they don't. Even if they've done all of the paperwork, they've done all of the work, if for some reason they don't pass, they have to fix it. And for well, it could be anything like VOCs. That's a big one. If somebody walks by a sampling station and they're wearing too much perfume, or they have a fairly fragrant shampoo, that could cause you to fail. I worked on a project once where they installed hand sanitizer, automatic hand sanitizer, on the wall, and they had a faulty one, and it was just spitting hand sanitizer on the floor. And they couldn't figure out for a solid 2 months why they kept failing the VOCs, where it was coming from. And it was just something as simple as a faulty automatic hand sanitizer that was attached to the wall. That's how sensitive some of these IAQ things are for well. But as I said, LEED does show that you can rent at a higher rate. So on $1 per square foot in a LEED certified building, the building is more valuable. Those studies don't really exist yet for well, but I imagine in the next couple of years we'll be seeing them. My real estate firm, we just renovated our office building, and we're LEED gold and well gold for our office building. So the push is definitely there for both of them because they do mean different things.
That's kind of what I was gonna. Oh, Tanya's in the waiting room. I was thinking of, as far as question was, your position currently is with a real estate firm.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of segue to, how do you communicate? I mean, some clients come in looking for this as qualifications for their building types, but for folks maybe that aren't as aware, how do you share that information with your renters?
So I'm still trying to figure that part out. Getting tenant engagement varies by building, it varies by neighborhood, it varies by country. And so, different things work differently in New York than they do in Boston, and even, Montreal, Toronto. And so getting tenant engagement going, we had a really, and I actually touch on this, energy and sustainability. So it's two separate things that mean very different things to very different people. Sustainability can mean very different things. So one of the things we did for tenant engagement is we installed beehives on the roof of one of our buildings. And we sell back, and we sell some of it, but we also give, there's like a little store set up now in the lobby where tenants can buy little things of honey and things like that. And the feedback has been really positive from the tenants. They're really excited. We're really excited. We have, I believe, 3 full hives on the roofs of one of our buildings. So we were really excited about that. We
Cool.
didn't know if we were going to get the full approval, but we did. So for me, it's more than just the energy portion. A lot of our tenants do pay their own utility bills, so it is easier on that because pitching them savings and spending money is very easy. So LED light programs through the utility and things like that. Low flow shower fixtures, letting them know that, hey, these are available for free through the utility. It really kind of makes things easy in providing them, but sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. But yeah, you kind of, for tenant engagement, you have to kind of go out and make an effort for it. When I was in the commercial side, it was a little bit easier because a lot of these firms and companies now have sustainability goals that are aligning with the Paris Accords, that are aligning with a lot of things that are going on, and a lot of companies they said it at first, and they realized they put it out in the public, and now they're kind of panicking when they went, oh no, we don't know what we're doing. A lot of corporations set rules for themselves without understanding what they meant. So they would come to the MEP, they would come to us because we were known for sustainability, we were known for sustainable design. And so our clients would come to us saying, how do I fix this? How do I make this work? What do I do? A lot of that when I was a consultant was just our clients knowing who we are and what services we provide. And it was really important.
Mhm. When you were a commissioning agent, was that for New York City? Like, what is that role?
So a commissioning agent, I was still working for an MEP firm. There is a credit in LEED that requires commissioning on buildings. And so that was what I was doing commissioning for, was primarily to meet the LEED credit. So that role is you review mechanical, electrical, plumbing drawings, as well as architectural for insulation and things of that manner, and ensure that you don't see any issues with the design. You don't see any ways that you might be able to make the design more efficient. You try to get involved as early as possible. And you take the building all the way through schematics to 100% completion. So it begins with reviewing drawings, and then it progresses to on-site inspections. Typically, I would walk a building depending on how fast they were moving. It could be once a week. It could be once a month. It kind of depend on where they were in construction, and it involved everything: HVAC system, plumbing, fire protection, pretty much everything that they were installing, to ensure that there weren't going to be any issues come the time when they started closing up walls. Because the last thing you want to have is you've closed up the walls, you're finishing up, you're doing your final testing, making sure your HVAC equipment runs, and something fails. My best example of this is I was working on a building and they were supposed to let me know before they closed up walls, and they didn't. The HVAC installer, the guy that was supposed to be installing the fan coil unit, so the HVAC unit in the ceiling, was sick and didn't call in. So everybody assumed it had been installed. The sheetrocker came in the next day, not knowing what HVAC equipment was supposed to be there, sheetrocked the ceiling. And come testing, we went to go turn on the fan coil unit and it wasn't there. So they had to cut a hole in the ceiling and install it. This project was moving extremely fast, but still, it's why we have commissioning agents. But part of that was communication with the construction team. You know, if they don't let you know what they're doing and where they're at, you know. And I was primarily working in for when I was doing that multifamily high rises. So, you know, 30-story buildings, 200 units. And so, you know, you can't check every single apartment. There are allowances for percentages you can check and things like that. But you hope you find the issues before they become major issues.
Right, right, right. All right, it's still open for any other questions for Ben. Tanya, sorry you joined us late, but thank you for being here. And we did in talking with Ben prior to today, mentioned our elective course that has the option to use the LEED Green Associate exam as a final. So you can take a final through the course or that. So that was part of our conversation and thinking about all these certifications and what they mean and how you would go about it. So I think any thoughts from student perspective on whether this is of interest? It's a very specific focus for sure within a sustainability career.
Yeah, I mean, even then, I would just say that you know, LEED is a recognized in the built environment, and so if you have the opportunity, I would say go for it, because it shows that you understand what LEED is, how it works, which not everybody does.
I had one more kind of particular question. The energy modeling schematic you showed, is that
Mhm.
software specific to your certified energy modeler?
No, it's not. So the program that I used, so there was a couple that I used, but the best one that I used was called IESVE. It's actually it's based in the UK. So it's a global software, but it's approved by pretty much every governing body as an approved energy modeling software. So a big part of that was New York City code compliance for energy code. They have one that's essentially like you fill out a sheet and it's either yes or no, or you can do energy modeling to show that you're using less energy than a code building. New York City IESB is an approved software. Same thing for Boston, DC, and pretty much everywhere else. I've also done Florida, Massachusetts, yeah, Carolinas. It's been approved everywhere that I've needed to use it. As well as California, they have their own energy code. It's an approved software for them. Yeah, and it's a pretty advanced software. You can get yourself into a little bit of trouble if you don't know what you're doing. But yeah.
Okay. Neil, feel free.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks, man. That was really interesting. Appreciate hearing about kind of your pathway and something you mentioned about I think just a second ago about people are really interested in getting a kind of a LEED approved level without getting the LEED approval for cost reasons. So I don't know if you can speak to this, but is that kind of worrisome from LEED's standpoint? Because then their clients are basically people like you who are looking for the certification to prove you know what you're doing, but there's not as much interest on putting that plaque on the wall because people are just going to do the right thing anyway. So like in the bigger picture, is LEED still relevant?
So I'm not gonna lie, that's been an honest conversation of people in my field. So LEED comes out with new standards, and they had been kind of sitting on one for a while. They've just put out a new one. I don't think it's mandatory yet. I think it's still in the optional phase. So, and when they do that, it kind of gets pushed a little bit. But even then, there are my clients that say, yeah, I don't need that LEED plaque. But typically those are people that own and operate their own buildings. And so, our big clients that aren't worried about renting out any spaces. They know they're going to fill their building. Where more people go after lead is when they are the operators of a building, owner operators, but they don't occupy the building. They rent out the space. So when it goes out to the real estate market for, collecting rent and things of that, it still holds weight in that sense. So yeah, a lot of companies, like I said, that occupy their own buildings, they'll take lead standards, which is where it still is important. So their building specifications and things like that will directly reference lead. And so they're still looking for people that know what lead is and what those standards are and the familiarity with them. I've even had a client that expected you to submit all the lead paperwork to them, and all the documentation to them for their review. But they didn't want to pay lead for the plaque. So, as time progresses and as energy codes progress, it is interesting to see how relevant lead remains. As I said, current energy code in New York is lead silver, without doing anything extra and beyond. And same thing goes for California, Massachusetts, Cambridge, or Boston and Cambridge both have pretty good energy codes that they've adopted themselves, and that are essentially lead silver. And so as lead continues to try and push the envelope, that's kind of where lead becomes important, is they're still the ones that are pushing everybody to design more efficient buildings. Take it beyond that, keep pushing the envelope. And where they are getting into more, I will say, is the embodied carbon aspect of all of this. So my job up until the last few years ago was all operational carbon. How much carbon does a building do? So that's scope 1. So scope 1 is anything burned on site. Scope 2 is the carbon that is generated from the electricity you purchase, from any heating systems you purchase and things like that. So that's been my primary, is that scope 1 and scope 2. But now scope 3, which is the downstream, everything that it took to get that energy produced or to get that item produced is embodied. So if you had to ship the natural gas to the electricity plant, the gas burned by that truck counts. And so now LEED is really pushing that scope 3. So not only talking about the carbon that your building will use, but how much carbon did it take to build your building? Concrete is a takes a massive amount of carbon to produce virgin concrete. And so with the pushes of scope 3 and some of the stuff LEED has been doing, we're seeing the new technologies in concrete. People are injecting carbon into and encapsulating carbon in concrete. They're using it as reaction agents, and there's a lot of chemistry going on with concrete that's a little above my chemistry knowledge. But yeah, there is a ton of chemistry that's going on with carbon. They're using it as a curing agent, I've read, and yeah, which is really great. I've seen it where it's also been used as to help being able to cure concrete in colder temperatures. So I've been seeing some really cool applications on the scope 3, on the embodied carbon of buildings that LEED has definitely pushed forward on.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Ben. My name is Katrina Searing, and I am the Associate Director of the Open Academy at SUNY ESF. You may know that we run the New York State Green Building Conference, and so I
think you muted.
I did. Sorry, I meant to hit send in the chat, and I was on my mute button. So I'm just throwing in as a shameless plug the website for the conference. We always have a presentation on cement every year. There's one on concrete or so it's fascinating to learn about the growth, not only in in the industry and the standards, like, you know, the various versions of LEED, but then also the materials and the advancement of the materials through time. So it sounds like it would be great to have you submit an abstract for the conference and engage with us that way as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's become a huge thing. Life cycle assessments, you know, all of that has become huge in the built environment and sustainability. My real estate company just recently went through and did an entire life cycle assessment of all of our building materials that we use in our apartment renovations. So one of the things so my company is based in Sweden. So we have to comply with EU regulations as well as US regulations. And so one of the big things we're having to do is comply with what is called the EU taxonomy, which is a huge undertaking that we are still working with and trying to figure out what that's going to entail. But
Does that mean
essentially you have
converting
to
to metric system?
So it's a lot of, not only is it ethical, there's quite a bit of vendor, so where are you getting your supplies from? So there's a whole ethics question behind it, as well as a sustainability aspect of reporting the life cycle assessment embodied carbon of your project materials that you're using, and are they in compliance? Right now, the EU taxonomy is just saying you just need to submit. No one needs to be in compliance. So you can say, no, we don't have any projects in compliance. But in a few years, we're going to have to say we're in compliance or take fines. And that includes any projects in the US as well. So because we are registered in Sweden and part of the EU, all of our US and Canada projects will have to comply with those regulations as well, which has been interesting working with some of our vendors here in the States.
Yeah. You guys are probably pushing the envelope a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, we have quite a few vendors that have said we're not doing that. No one else is asking us for that. We're not doing it. So it's been kind of an interesting, the market, sometimes it's the market before the laws. And to the earlier question, that's what LEED has really been great for. It pushes the market before any laws go in place.
I kind of like as a follow-up to that then, so, you know, we talked about, you know, LEED, you know, comparing it to building standard, you know, at least in, you know, these larger metro areas. But like sometimes you do see those like trickle down effects of like, you know, when the EU puts in some sort of regulation. I mean, you look at what's happened with Apple now, right? They killed the lightning cable finally.
Thank God.
Do you see Europe really leading in a lot of cases of some of these things? But then, I mean, over this 10 years, have you seen some of those things start to trickle into the US, especially when you have like these international players, probably for more commercial type of spaces?
So we see it more in the US, we see it more with California and New York putting forth regulations that drive the rest of the country. Manufacturers in the US don't want to produce two different products. It's very similar to car manufacturers. You know, the California emission laws in California are way stricter than the federal laws. So everybody just, you know, designs their cars to California. One of the big ones is refrigeration. So with the Kigali Accord, which is the new, you know, refrigeration global accord that was signed, that definitely driving force. In a couple years, the current the current standard for refrigeration and HVAC equipment will no longer be allowed in new equipment. We've got to move over to a new refrigeration. The technology in refrigeration in the built environment is fascinating. I'm really excited about a current project that I'm working on, where I am converting an oil boiler in one of our old buildings, and we're doing natural gas. Unfortunately, that produces its own steam, and there's really no good tech out there right now. but natural gas steam boiler, but I'm using a heat pump for the domestic hot water, and the refrigeration in the heat pump is CO2. So it's zero ozone and zero global warming potential. So if there is a leak, we fix the leak and we move on. It's no damage done. So there really is some great technologies. The biggest, especially with refrigeration, it's the one I know the best. Europe we have stricter fire regulations here in the United States, especially in New York City. Many of the refrigerants that they use in Europe, we consider too flammable. So they're banned in a lot of our cities. So like New York City in particular, a lot of the low global warming potential refrigerants that they're using in Europe, we're just not allowed to use because the FDNY says absolutely not. Or the FDNY, or there's the ASHRAE laws, both for refrigerant and for fire protection and things like that, the ANSI laws. We're just not allowed to use them, and nor do I ever think we will.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, as we are closing in on time here, and just put it out if anything else to relay, either through chat, Jason or Rosa, you're welcome to ask, but don't want to put anyone on the spot. So I will be sending along a follow-up email, and we'll have a recording once this is done. And you made me think earlier, Ben, about NYSERDA. Specifically, we've had a student in the past have success with an internship opportunity through NYSERDA. So I will look into that too and include, I think, that as a resource, but we'll communicate about some of these other associations for links and more learning. And otherwise, I think that was really fascinating, and I appreciate you sharing with us and with this series and our students. So any other last comments from folks on the screen? Awesome. Wonderful. All right. Thanks for being here. And
Thank you.
we'll be in touch, and we'll be in touch for spring speakers. That's to come. So I will send it out.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Ben.